Are we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not.
Hi there, and welcome to Better Than Not, a podcast that aims to capture shifting perspectives and thought-provoking ideas in conversation based loosely on my series, A Changing Frame of Reference, which you can read on the Substack app. I hope you will, as it might give you some insight into what the podcast is all about. I also hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel, Better Than Not, so you can capture some of these episodes that we've recorded already, and allow me to do some more of these with great guests like we have today. I'm your host, Doug Gardam, and today it's a pleasure and a privilege to welcome Barry Keane. Barry, how are you today?
Doug, I couldn't be better. Thank you for asking, and it's great to be on with you.
I'm very excited for this conversation today. Barry is I'll say a session drummer, or a drummer per se. He's a musician, has been that for a long time. He's also an athlete. He spent a lot of time, I think he said 13 years as a record executive. And he's also the drummer for the late Gordon Lightfoot's band. And so I'm very excited to get started with the conversation. There's a lot to talk about. But Barry, how does a person who's born in Philadelphia, has an incredible athletic skill, was actually scouted by the Yankees, and find himself playing for 48 years with Canada's Gordon Lightfoot? How does that come about?
It is a parlay of unusual events, and those events linked together, I'm sure, could never be duplicated again, Doug. It started with a recording engineer accidentally erasing a drum track, and then I'll say it's an incredible story only because the odds of it happening and where it started and where it ended up. So if you want to hear more, let me know.
So Barry, at what age were you when this started? It's like, I'm very interested in this story because I always think it's neat how, shall we say, accidents, although I don't necessarily believe in accidents, like a non-recorded drum track gets you drumming.
Well, me getting involved in the music business, I was born into it because my father, back in, I guess, the late 40s, he was in the U.S. Army, came back from serving in Burma in World War II.
Oh, wow.
And he became the wax machine operator at RCA Studios in New York City, recording like Perry Como and Frank Sinatra. And like when people went direct to wax, my father ran the wax machine. And then he became a salesman for MGM and Mercury Records. We lived in Chicago. We lived all around New York City. We were in New Jersey and Long Island and Connecticut for the first 5 years of my life. And then he got hired to run a record distribution company in Canada called Quality Records. So in 1954, we moved to Canada. We moved to Toronto. And I mean, music, records, it's been part of my entire life. That's where it started for me.
It's interesting because you moved a lot, you said, before you were 5 years old. And we share that. My father was with the bank, and we moved almost every year. And then when I was 5, my mom kind of put down the law and said, that's it. But so when you're doing that, so your father's in this business, what got you? Well, I think it's probably almost impossible for you not to be kind of absorbed into that. But how did that start for you?
Well, I have a very vivid memory of being, I don't know, you'd have to chronologically check this out, but I remember being in a diner in the States with my parents and asking my parents if I could have quarter after quarter because I had to hear, oh my gosh, what was the name of it? Shaboom Shaboom on the jukebox in the diner. And I had to hear that record over and over and over again. And, I might have been 3 or 4 years old, 5 years old, maybe. And that was kind of like music was in me somehow. And records, good records, were in me at a very early age. So that's where it started. And then my father forced me to go to work in his factory when I was 15 years old. He forced me kicking and screaming because summers to me were baseball and meeting new girls, right?
Yeah.
And having to go to work was like, come on. So that's kind of where I really started in the music record business. I was 15.
So were you playing at that point in time, or like how did that did you just get surrounded by how did that start? Like were you already playing then?
I was not playing. I didn't start playing the drums until I was 15 until that same year.
Wow.
And it was as a result of seeing the Beatles and especially the Dave Clark Five on the Ed Sullivan Show. Because my parents had tried to get me involved in music. Apparently I had piano lessons at an early age, but that didn't work out. Apparently I bit the teacher. So that's kind of the end of my piano career. And then again, because my father was in the record business, we used to go for spring break to Miami quite a bit. And he got us tickets for Ricky Nelson concert. And I was like maybe 10 years old, and I saw Ricky Nelson, and I heard the girls screaming, and it looked so cool to me. And I said, I want to be Rick Nelson. So they got me guitar lessons, and the guitar lessons were so far from what Ricky Nelson was doing. I was painful learning to play Home Home on the Range and stuff like that with a guitar teacher who didn't spell that good. And so that was the end of my guitar career. But then seeing Ringo and Dave Clark on the Ed Sullivan Show, especially Dave Clark, this good-looking fella up on a drum riser with girls screaming, I said, I want to be Dave Clark. And I was 15 when that happened. And the other fortunate part was I was surrounded in my neighborhood by other guys who were interested in the Stones, Beatles, that kind of thing. My first bass player was Mike Levine, who went on to Triumph. Yes.
No way.
We used to rehearse in his parents' living room, Mike, and we're still friends. But that's like how lucky can you be? Mike's father was a bass player. He was an executive in the Musicians Union. So Mike had such a great musical background, and I was, I absorbed some of that just being around Mike. So that was when I was 15. We started copying the Beatles and stuff like that.
And you were hooked.
I absolutely was.
So when you're showing this kind of interest now, mid-teens, yes, is your dad and mom encouraging this, or is this like, oh, this wasn't part of the plan?
No, my parents were fantastic. I mean, like other than having a trumpet player or a violinist, maybe, like having your kid pounding away on the drums in the basement, the patience that it takes. And both my parents were very encouraging, and they let it happen. And when we weren't rehearsing in Mike's living room, we were rehearsing in my parents' basement, and my folks were fantastically encouraging.
You kind of had to I'll say practice or rehearse at the drummer's place, as I recall too. That was like if you were the family that had the drummer, everybody was coming to your house because the drums were easy to keep just steady there, right?
Yes, no question about it. And later on, when we had a B3 player, carrying around a Hammond B3 and a Leslie speaker.
Yes.
So we ended up being at the organ player's house a little bit more.
It's funny when you say that, because that's kind of what got me to play bass, because I played piano from like the Conservatory of Music, and that wasn't very portable then. So I get
Right.
the being at
There you
that is very cool.
practical and
So
realism.
you said about a recording when we were doing some tests here. You were saying about that's kind of how, like, a missed track or a non-recorded missed button. That's what got you started in drumming. How did describe that a little more? Like, to me, that's really funny.
Well, if you have time, it's a bit of a story, and it's a parlay of events that are unbelievable. But
Oh, yeah.
anyway, I had played the drums in local bands with Mike and with some others, but then I had become a record executive, and I quit playing the drums. Like the drums were in my past. Now I was a record executive. So I was at home on a Sunday night. I was the A&R man for RCA Records in Canada. I had signed a power trio out of Montreal called Charlie, which featured a fantastic guitarist named Walter Rossi. Anyway, they had recorded the album. Walter and Mark Smith, the engineer on the album, were mixing it. They had sent the bass player and the drummer back to Montreal. They were gone. And the assistant engineer accidentally erased one of the drum tracks on the album. And Mark called frantically on a Sunday night, Mark the engineer, and said, "We have a problem. We need to get the album mixed. And I'm sure you, Barry, want to get the album mixed. We need to get a replacement drum track. Do you know anybody on a Sunday night who can come in and play drums?" And I was thinking the kind of music it was kind of Jimi Hendrixy, that, that,
Yep.
Ray Vaughan kind of blues rock. I thought I couldn't think of anybody. And while I was pausing, Mark said, "Wait a minute, you're a drummer." And I said, "Mark, I used to be a drummer. I don't play anymore." And he said, "Well, we have the rented set of drums here, and unless we get a drummer, we're wasting all the studio time. Why don't you come down and give it a shot?" I said, "Mark, come on, man." I said, "I don't play the drums anymore." He said, "Well, it's up to you." So I went, I played. Walter liked what I did so much that they actually had me replace a couple of other tracks on the album. It worked out. So fast forward a few months, Mark Smith is asked to put together some auxiliary musicians for an upcoming Gordon Lightfoot album. Now, because of the way I played, Mark had me play on some other records for him. And again, it was like, I don't really do this. I'm a record executive now, but I did it. Mark had to get a drummer, a keyboard player, banjo, auto harp. There were auxiliary musicians to augment Gordon Lightfoot's touring group, which at the time was Gordon, Rick Haynes on bass, Terry Clements on lead, and Red Shea on lead. But they needed drums, and so anyway, because Mark knew me and knew my playing, he hired me to play in 1972 on Gordon Lightfoot's album. Okay. So and it's funny, the first night we were there, it was Lenny Waronker was the producer, from James Taylor, and
man.
the whole time, like, this is the Gordon Lightfoot album being produced by Lenny Waronker. This is the big time. So I came in. I'm still learning to be a studio drummer, in part time, and we had a rehearsal in the back studio the night before we were starting to record. And as I was tearing down, I think it went okay. I thought I did okay. I
Yep.
was leaving the studio, and Lenny Waronker was on the phone, and I heard him say, "Look, man, you got to get your ass up here. This guy just isn't cutting it." And I thought for sure, me. I thought for sure,
Oh,
thought I, you know, and so, and when I walked by him, he saw me and he kind of had that startled look like, I hope you didn't just hear what I just,
ah,
it was that kind of a thing. So
yep.
for sure, I went home waiting for the phone to ring, woke
Oh,
up in the morning waiting for the phone to ring. I came in at the time and there were a couple of changes from the night before, but one of them wasn't me. So this was kind of like, I guess I made the cut. And we, and you know how life has these moments you never forget. We
oh,
had recorded 3 or 4 songs, and one of the songs, the next song coming up is a song called Lazy Morning.
yes.
And Lenny ran down the instruments who were going to play on it, and he went through and said, "Okay, Gordon, no drums on this, right?" And I remember Gordon saying, "No, I want him on it. I like the way he plays." So
Oh,
that was kind of like,
you're
that was
in.
the endorsement from Mr. Lightfoot. And from that moment forward, I kind of had a little more confidence in that kind of stuff. And man, that album was 53 years ago, Doug. So, but I
What
remember
album was that?
Old Dan's Records. It was one of my favorite Lightfoot albums. It didn't have a big hit on it. It had some minor hits, but still one of my favorite albums to go back and listen to.
So Barry, like I'm trying to get a feeling here because I think this is like a real cool instance in that, like, are you like super nervous, or is
Yes.
this like you're like it like but you're able to play very well?
Well, apparently, I think I did what I felt. And I can go back and tell you what I learned. I had 2 summer courses at the Eastman School of Music in the late 60s.
Oh,
And I think an awful lot of what I learned, and it wasn't music, it was and it was in engineering and producing. Those were the summer courses, which were taught by, you ready? Phil Ramone, the legendary, right?
no
Phil
way.
was the instructor. No. And I spent 2 summers with Phil Ramone, and the other guys in my class were Jack Richardson from, how many Guess Who great hits
Yep.
Jack ended up producing, other artists. Bob Ezrin, who another brick in the wall, Pink Floyd. A guy from Connecticut who had this new band called Steam. And from what he learned a couple months later, he had na 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 na
Yep.
na
Yep.
na. He produced that, so it was just a wonderful environment. But what happened was Jack Richardson brought some 8-track tapes of the Guess Who. Phil brought some 8-track tapes of Dionne Warwick. Okay, and we got to mix. The guys in the class, we got to do our own mixes of These Eyes, She's Come
Unbelievable.
Undone, I'll Never Fall in Love Again, Do You Know the Way to San Jose?
Oh,
So
oh,
I was mixing a Dionne Warwick track, just for practice, just for fun. But I was hearing the arrangements of Burt Bacharach and listening. Why is the drummer playing this? Why is the bass player? Why is it? Because they went together.
yep.
And I was learning, and though it wasn't consciously learning, I was subconsciously learning the place of each individual instrument. And I think that really guided me in my drum playing, that I played more as a producer who was trying to figure out what the drummer should play rather than trying to show off playing the drums. I always tried to fit in to the track, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Oh yeah, because I mean, when in the essence of what you're saying, you're trying to make the sum great, like the whole greater than the sum of the parts, right? and you're not really
Correct.
even aware of it. And it's when you become aware of it, to me, that it messes it up. That
Yeah.
is that is a
Yeah.
crazy story. But I mean, I'm just hearing you say this, and like people would die to be part of that, and you like almost did nothing. They just were there, right?
Well, again, it goes back to my father. My father found out about these summer courses, and he
Oh,
paid for me to go to Rochester. And they were 2-week courses, and I mean, you hang out for a month with Phil Ramone, just
oh,
hanging out, like you
that's
can
crazy.
imagine. And years later, back in 2007, Anne Murray's last album was produced by Phil Ramone, and I played on the Toronto tracks on
Oh,
that album. It was just
oh,
coincidence, but there you go, how some things come around full circle. Yeah.
it's amazing to me how that kind of fits together and puts it and comes into play when it's like, what did I do to control this other than play, right? Like you played and you listened, and I'm going like, what? Wow, that is a crazy story. So you mentioned the Guess Who here, and I can't help but go, I think I read somewhere that, were you in the room when the name came up? Can you tell that
Well,
story? I think that's a crazy story.
it's a crazy real story, but yes, I went into work with my father. It was in 1965, so I was 16. I was still working in the warehouse, and I wasn't driving yet, so I went to work with my dad on
Oh wow.
380 Birchmount Road in Scarborough. And so we were sitting in his office before, and it was like 7 o'clock in the morning or something. His right-hand man, a fellow named George Scroot, came into my father's office and said, "George, do you have a minute? I want to run an idea by you. And Barry, I'm glad you're here too." And I thought, why? What, because I was a 15-year-old kid. That's all.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he said, "Okay, George." They were both Georges. My father's George Keane. George Struth said to my dad, "George, we have this tape. We just got this record coming out by this group from Winnipeg. They're called Chad Allen and the Expressions. But I would like to try and trick the radio stations into thinking that it's one of the British invasion bands." And so he played the tape and said to me, "Sounds like the Beatles, doesn't it?" And I said, "Well, kind of." He says, "But doesn't it sound like one of those British invasion bands, like the Searchers or. And I
Yes.
said, "Yes, Mr. Truth, it does." It was okay. So anyway, he went to my father and said, "George, what I want to do is press the single on plain white labels. And then I want to get the radio stations to try to figure out which British band it is." So my father said, "Great idea."
Yeah.
And Mr. Struth and his secretary, they took black felt pens. The records came back on white plain labels, and they printed "Guess Who" with a question mark on it. They sent the records out, and a week later, Mr. Struth came back to my father and said, "Good news and bad news. They're playing the record shaken all over, but the stations think the name of the band is the Guess Who." That's 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 absolutely true story. No question.
Oh, Barry, that's a crazy story to me. I just love those kind of stories. And I have a feeling we're going to hear a few more of them. But that
And I
to me
just
is
saw
just
Burton
like,
coming.
oh, you did?
I just ran into
Oh,
Burton at the Lightfoot tribute show. Burton did a song at the Lightfoot tribute thing we did last year.
oh,
And
cool.
Burton flagged me down in the hallway because I had been speaking to his manager and said, "You work for Quality. Your father, did this and did that." And we were kind of reminiscing a little. And his parting words to me were, "And I always hated that frickin' name." And he didn't say frickin', of course. uh,
What an amazing story. And like Burton Cummings says, I've often quoted him like with Elton John and with Billy Joel, is their talents, they can sit down and play like literally any song you can think of, right? It's just to be in a club where you could kind of go in, they could play any song. It's kind of a crazy thing to me.
No, Burton is so talented as a keyboard player and as a singer and songwriter. He's unbelievably talented.
No, that's a very cool, very, very cool story. So while we're talking about your dad, you had just commented when we were talking about he worked with some very famous artists, but one that recently passed, right? That you were showing me. Can you tell a little bit about that story?
I can. My father was a pioneer in the Canadian record business. There's no question. I remember distinctly being in a sales meeting. A few years later, I graduated to being in the sales department, and I can tell you a Sam the Record Band story about that. But anyway,
neat.
Well, we were in the sales meeting, and Mr. Struth, again, who I just spoke of, brought the latest version of Billboard magazine in, and he had ticked off the records that Quality distributed in Canada. And there were 55 of the Hot 100 that Quality handled. So, and that's the company my father built. He made deals with A&M, with Atlantic Atco, with Stax of Old, with Dot, with Buddha, Bell, all those record labels. My father made those deals. And so, yeah, one of the artists on MGM, I have a gold record in my office that was given to my father from Connie Francis. And if I may, a little show and tell here.
Absolutely.
Okay, can you see that?
Yep, I can see they're centered. That's good right there, actually, Barry. It's that's your dad with Connie Francis, right?
That's it, yeah. This is from, I have to say, the late 50s, I think. So, and you know, just a couple of other real quick, if I may. Here's my dad with Herb Alpert, when Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass were so hot, right?
Yes.
That's my dad. And one more, which was more up my alley back then, of course, was here's my dad with the Young Rascals.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So anyway,
Barry, you must have been totally in your element with this then. Like getting to see.
I have I can't find it, and I'm killing myself. I had a Christmas card from Pat Boone. Like,
oh wow.
You know, you're the boss's son, and there are so many privileges that go along with being the boss's son. But I remember going to see the Smothers Brothers and being, you know, backstage and talking to the Smothers Brothers and just all of that kind of stuff. I mean, the music business, I had no choice. It was in me. It was around me.
Born into it.
I was born into it. And they say one of the most unfair, one of the one of the worst lotteries in the world is the birth lottery. That you have no choice who you're born into. You have no choice whether your race, your gender, your environment, your parents. I won the birth lottery, no question about it.
You know, Barry, when you say that, this is a comment that comes up a lot I've written about it, but it comes a lot up the Better Than Not podcast, and that is the fact that, like, we have no control over how we came in, why we were born in the year we were born versus 100 years before that or 100 years after it. So it's kind of neat seeing you acknowledge that in this business that you kind of found yourself in. So I'm going to come back to where you were talking about, which I think is such a neat thing, about Gordon Lightfoot recognizing your drumming and this feel that you've you've kind of been it's almost like a pathway has been opened for you to go to courses with Phil Ramone and Jack Richardson, and taking that, not per se from what the course is showing you, but to be able to put it into your playing and then have it recognized by someone like Gordon Lightfoot. Like, I like how he plays. Like, how does that story continue?
Well, it led to a lot of other work, not just because I had played with Gordon Lightfoot or recorded with Gordon Lightfoot, but Mark Smith and the other engineers heard me play, which led to arrangers and producers hearing me play. And talk about being in the right place at the right time. An awful lot, or all of the other studio drummers in Toronto at the time, were jazz based. And they sounded like jazz drummers, and they played like jazz drummers. They're all fantastic. The guys back, Alex Lazaroff and Terry Clark and Dave Brown, all the existing guys who were getting all the work. I sounded different, and I played differently. I was not a jazz-based drummer. I never wanted to be Buddy Rich or, Gene Krupa. I wanted to fit in,
Right.
playing drums with a track. So I was different. And my sound was more like the sound you heard on pop records. Because that's what I heard my whole life. So it was my sound. But the funny part was, and I'm so grateful to these arrangers and producers, they lived with my shortcomings. They hired me to sound like I did. But I didn't read music at all. And I had to learn. It was trial by fire. I was going in doing, a Ford commercial or a Chevy commercial with Guido Basso and Mo Kaufman and, the best Don Thompson, the best musicians in the country. And I had no idea what I was doing. But guys like Eric Robertson and those, top-notch arrangers, Rick Wilkins, they worked with me and they knew what I couldn't do, but they liked what I could do. So very patient. They led me through an awful lot of things as I learned to read a little bit better and to, fit in a little bit better with these great schooled musicians. And it was a gradual learning and building process. And so, playing with Gord, doing a Gord album, I mean, that was kind of the springboard into a higher level of studio work. After that,
when you said that about them knowing what you could do well, they overcame what you didn't. This was an interview I heard a while back with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. And Matt Damon, when they were young, because they had crazy stories as well. And Ben Affleck apparently told Matt Damon, he said, don't judge me on how bad my bad ideas are. Judge me on how good my good ideas are. And you just said that. That's exactly what you said about them finding you.
There you go.
Yes. Very cool.
So I have something in common with Ben Affleck. That's great.
So I'm going to go back a little bit because the first album that I remember with that I got it from the library on an old cassette tape was Sundown.
Yep.
And I played that, I tell you, Barry, over and over again on my little recorder. In fact, I learned how to play that song on the piano. And it's much better on guitar, by the way. But that was my beginning in the Gordon Lightfoot. And then I'm kind of thinking, like, you're living these experiences, which is kind of a really cool thing to be able to talk about to me.
It's surreal. Yeah.
So as you continue on now, when did you go on the road with Gordon Lightfoot as well?
After the Old Dan's Records album, Gord approached me and said, I've never had a drummer on tour, but would you be interested? Now, I had a full-time gig at RCA at the time, and I'd never toured with anybody. I drove around Ontario playing in my little high school rock bands, but I'd never toured with anybody. So I honestly didn't know if I would like it. And he didn't know if he would like having a drummer. But he said, let's give it a shot. I've got a 3-day tour, Cleveland, Buffalo, and Washington, D.C. And I want you to come and do the tour with me. It's happening in a month or so. I said, yeah, great. I can go away for 3 days. Yeah, sure. 2 weeks before that, the phone rings. It's Gord. Hey, man. Yeah, Gord, how are you? Yeah, man, I got cold feet. I can't do it. No offense, but so I didn't go on tour with them. Now, fast forward to the Juno Awards in 1975. I'm there representing RCA Records. Gord is there to receive one of his many Junos. He saw me and came over to me and said, hey, man, how are you doing? I said, good, Gord, how are you? Look, I got this here album coming up. I want you to play on it, and then I want you to go on tour. And I said, I thought, okay. And that ended up being the Summertime Dream album with the record, the Edmund Fitzgerald. It was that album, and there were a few more drum-oriented kind of songs on it. So he was kind of, like it or not, kind of stuck with having to have a drummer on tour. And we started in March of 76 at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel. Was my first gig with Gordon Lightfoot.
Oh, wow. So this takes me to this. So now you're very used to being in studio and working with many artists. And I'm going to say possibly some of those artists are heroes of yours, but you've gotten through the nerves to be able to put that together. What was it like now you're in front of a crowd for the first time? What can you, I'm sure you can remember this first gig because you probably, it's a substantial crowd, I'm going to guess, for Gordon Lightfoot. What was it like, Barry?
14 shows in 7 days at the Big Deal Casino Ballroom, or showroom, I should say. Completely sold out with I think we had an opening act. I can't remember. If we had an opening act, it was David Steinberg or it was some big deal comedian. I mean, this was the big time, right?
Yeah.
We had a rehearsal, Doug, the day before with a full orchestra backing Gordon because the casino wanted the orchestra. So we had a full orchestra behind me with Nick Tucaro, who was, the famous LA arranger. He charts for everybody. I met Nick on the Old Dance Records album. He wrote the charts and played piano on the Old Dance Records album. So we were put together. Gordon flew me and a nameless recording engineer from Toronto because he wanted to make things in his comfort zone as much as he could. Now, playing in a big deal casino showroom was way out of Gordon's comfort zone. And with an orchestra,
okay.
Completely out of his comfort zone. Now, his comfort zone really, to be honest, was the riverboat. Like where he was in full control of sound, in full control of, where Gordon liked to be in control of everything. At a big deal casino showroom, so many things are out of your control. So anyway, we're rehearsing, and Gordon never gave the band set lists. Like we never knew what songs you could guess, you could have an idea. He never gave us set lists.
No way.
Song 1, song 2. No, never. We would go on stage not 100% knowing even what the first song was going to be. Honest, I swear to God. So, and that's a testament to the music.
That's a crazy story, Barry.
Well, okay, it gets crazier. I show up in Lake Tahoe, okay? We hadn't rehearsed.
Yep.
And Gord is such a perfectionist. And I had said to Gordon, what songs should I learn? He said, don't worry, man, just scull it. And I wasn't a Gordon Lightfoot fan. I didn't have a single Gordon Lightfoot album at home. I
Oh,
knew the Old Dance record, right? And I knew
yeah.
the Summertime Dream. I knew those songs. I knew If You Could Read My Mind, but other than that, I didn't know them. So here I am. I show up on the big stage at the Sahara Tahoe, Nick DeCaro and a full orchestra behind me, rehearsal. Gord starts playing, and this was in the, Gord's drinking days, and he's angry and he's uptight because he's out of his comfort zone.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
so Gord starts playing, doesn't tell anybody what song it is. I have no idea what song it is. Nick DeCaro, because I'm closest to the orchestra, comes up to me and goes, "What song is this?" Nick, I don't know. And so by the time Nick recognized what the song was, and you could hear the music stands, you could hear, if it was Carefree Highway. Okay, Carefree Highway. You heard everybody scurrying to find the right part for Carefree Highway. As soon as the orchestra started playing, Gord stopped. And then he would play another song. And Nick would come to me and say, "What is it?" "Nick, I don't know." The same thing happened. By the time Nick recognized it and the orchestra got the right charts up, Gord would stop. So as it turned out, Gord was unhappy with the sound. He sent the the sound engineer back to Toronto. He fired the orchestra. He sent Nick back to LA. And again, I'm thinking, okay, I'm next. I stayed. And if it wasn't for Rick Haynes, we went on stage in the first. I have no idea what songs Gord's going to play. And even when he started playing the song, I didn't know what it was. Rick would come to me and say, "Sticks, brushes, layout." That's the way my first gig with Gordon Lightfoot went. It was
Oh my goodness.
unbelievable.
And on top of all that, like you must be very nervous. Just like you're in front of a large crowd. It's like this is not your comfort zone either, right?
Not even close, Doug. And Peter Goddard, the great music
Yes.
critic from
Yes.
the Toronto Star, he flew to Lake Tahoe because Gordon Lightfoot was adding drums to his act. That was it was a
big
dual
deal.
reason. Gordon Lightfoot playing a big casino in Nevada, and he's adding drums. So there was that. I knew I had Peter Goddard watching my every move and listening to it, and I called home the next day. There was an article in the Star Peter Goddard had written, and it was very positive about how much the drums added to
Oh,
Gordon
cool.
Lightfoot, and it was like, yeah. So it was crazy.
So, Bear, I'm going to switch gear. I want to come back to this, but I'm going to switch gears a bit here because we have these our education systems. We have these trainings. We have all these all the people that want to learn to do what you're actually doing. And as you describe it, you're actually learning it as you're doing it. Do you speak to like music programs and things like that as far as for like I'll say younger people in the music world, like because it seems to me like we're almost in a world today you can't do anything without being trained first, and your training is in front of an audience in Lake Tahoe, right? Are you able to
No question.
are you able to express that to like younger up and coming musicians or people like that? That do you share some of this with them as far as what like to go out and like yeah you're going to be nervous and you're going to be scared but you got to go and do it anyway. Do you like are you able to do you do any of that type of thing at all or have?
I did it once. I was invited by a friend of mine, Terry McManus, who ran that production course out in Fanshawe College out
Okay.
in London.
Yes
He
okay.
had to come out and speak, but No, as far as speaking to a group, I haven't done that. I occasionally run into people, especially at our meet and greets. People want to talk to me about how did you get here? What should I do to get there? That kind of a thing. But that's on a one-to-one
Yes.
basis. But no, I've only spoken to a group one time.
Well, the reason why I asked that is because what you're sharing today is unbelievable to me. But in many ways, it's very in juxtaposition, the reality versus what people think things are like. And how you're describing this, like, to be honest, I don't ever remember hearing someone not having a set list for a show. Like that to me, I'm going like, that would drive players just almost insane, like, because you want to be ready, right? You're trying to figure out, like, and then, like, and that's a reality that you lived. And that's why I said, like, I think it's really interesting seeing. I often say, is anything what it seems to be? And like your Guess Who story is another one to me. It's just one of those things that's kind of a crazy thing. But do you when you get a chance, like at these meet and greets and things like that, are people surprised by some of the things that you tell them about what's going on?
Yes, and I have to say, I think one of the really positive, there's a lot of positive things about the Lightfoot Band shows that we're doing now. The band stayed together after Gordon passed.
Cool.
Our meet and greets. Yeah, no, we're working. We're doing
I
a
did
number
not
of
know
shows.
that,
It's the
Barry.
same. Yeah, it's the Lightfoot Band, and we have a singer who's fabulous. He's just a great guy, and he sings Gordon Lightfoot songs like nobody you've ever heard. He's fabulous. So anyway, at our shows, we don't give out backstage passes. These days people are selling backstage passes or
Yeah, right.
giving them to VIPs, right? I heard the other day, I don't know if it's McCartney, it's $425 to buy a VIP backstage pass or something, and you can only buy them in a 4-pack. So
Oh,
it's like
yep.
$1,800. So anyway, the Lightfoot Band, 5 minutes or 10 minutes after our shows, we all come out to the lobbies. And if anybody wants to talk to us, we're there.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
people, it's an opportunity. People what's it like being in a band? What was it like being with Gordon? What's it like? And we're there and we love it. We love interacting with the bands. It's great.
I was going to say, it's because there's a lot of like, I think of times, like I mentioned Sundown, I think of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. There's super times. That was kind of what was going to, my next question was around, are there any songs, and it doesn't have to be Lightfoot necessarily, but any songs that you've done that are super memorable, whether it be experiences, artists that you worked with? Like, is there particular ones that, like, because you would know what went on behind the scenes. And I think
Hmm.
that's kind of a neat, like, I remember hearing things like at the beginning of Roxanne, Sting has shared that he sits on the piano accidentally. They left that in,
Hmm.
and now you listen for it. Or I think Steve Tyler's talked about Aerosmith, and they get their kind of the shaker sound. Somebody shook a sugar pack beside the microphone. Like, do you have things like that, of things that
Hmm.
you can remember, of things that you've worked on that, like, well, I broke a guitar string, or I broke a drumstick and we left it in.
I have a number of those that I think are interesting to me, but in the old Dan's Records album,
Oh, yep.
there was a song called You Are What I Am, which turned out to be a hit in Australia. I think it was a minor country hit in North America. But anyway, we were listening to a playback, and Lenny Waronker, the producer, said, Gord, it's a great track, but it needs something. And Gord paused and said, okay. And he pointed to me and said, you and me out there, pointing to the studio. And he said to the assistant engineer, I need 2 stools. So the assistant set up 2 stools, and he said, "We're going to throw some leg on this here." I thought, what? We're going to throw some what on this? So I knew I was about to do some kind of a duet with Gord. We sat side by side on these stools, and Gord started playing ham bone, right, on his leg, on his thighs. He started playing a rhythm on his. So I jumped in, and the 2 of us are playing, on our thighs. The engineer, Lee Hirschberg, Warner Brothers head engineer from LA, he had been invited to come up and join the party. Lee Hirschberg said, "Gord, it's a great rhythm. It's great what you're doing, but the sound isn't quite right." Gord again paused for a minute, and he said, "Okay, man, drop your britches." And I'm like, "Pardon?" And as he was saying that, I thought, okay, it's a joke on the new guy. We had our backs to the control room, and I thought, okay, very funny. I turned and looked. Nobody was laughing. And as I was processing this, Doug, Gord unbuckled, unbuttoned, unzipped, and down to his ankles go his jeans. And he looks at me like, "Okay, man, your turn." So down to my ankles go my pants. I'm sitting in RCA Studios, Toronto, on a stool beside Gordon Lightfoot. We're playing on our bare thighs like this. And Lenny Waronker said, "That's it, man." And that's the sound you hear on that record. So
that is great.
That was kind of memorable.
Oh my goodness. What song
I
is
had
that
3
on again?
weeks. "You Are What I Am." It's sort of a country. Yeah, it was a hit in various parts of the world.
It almost fits with the title of the song, actually. I gotta look that one up. That's cool.
Okay. There you go. So that's a little unusual. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So you said you have
I had
few
a
of these.
3-week. Yeah, there was a 3-week period where I had been hired by a wonderful gentleman who's now the conductor arranger for the Eagles, a fellow named Jim Ed Norman. He'd been hired to produce Anne Murray albums. And Anne apparently had gotten behind in producing albums. So we had to do 3 albums in a 2-week period. And on the weekends, I was flying to California with Gordon Lightfoot. So from Monday to Thursday, I was at Eastern Sound in Toronto doing Anne Murray records, going to the airport, flying to California on a Friday morning, taking it was like Gord flew private jet. So we jumped on the jet after our Sunday night concert, flew to Toronto. And so at 8:00 in the morning, landing there, I would drive straight to Eastern Sound, no sleep, and recorded Monday to Thursday Anne Murray albums. This went on for 3 weeks. Okay. In the midst of all of that, one of the songs that I swear to you, it didn't stand out to me. It was, Anne is fantastic. She's one of the greatest singers I've ever worked. She's so underrated. So she's fantastic. And she is one of the artists that would sing on every single track that the band was recording. Every track. She was one of the guys working to make tracks work. So anyway, at the end of it, a record came out called You Needed Me. And it became a number 1 record internationally. Record. And as God is my witness, I don't remember especially that song standing out in all of the 3 albums that we recorded with Anne. So I hear it and it's like, yeah, it's a great track. It's a great song like that. But you would think recording a number 1 hit, international number 1 hit, you'd think it would stand out. Got to be honest. It didn't to me. So.
Well, that's another, to me, it's over and over again. Nothing is what it seems, Barry. It's just, it's stunning to me. And I've heard other artists say, don't get me to pick the song because I don't know what's going to be good, right? So it's like you just reiterated that again, and that's personal experience. That's a crazy story to me. So it's I've said that numerous
So
times in this, but I love these stories because I think they just show us like we think we're in so much control of everything, and these are such huge demonstrations that nope, not at all.
nope,
So
not at all. Just ride the wave.
do you I'm gonna go back to one of the songs that I had mentioned because I think it might be one of Gordon outside of Sundown would be the record the Edmunds Fitzgerald. Do you remember working on that song?
Absolutely. And that is one of those great memories, Doug. It was, I'll see if I can make a real long story short, but we
That's okay
rehearsed
if it's
in
long.
Gordon's solarium. Okay. We're set up in Gord's solarium in his Rosedale mansion. And we rehearsed, I want to say 13 or 14 songs for the upcoming album, okay, which was going to be the Summertime Dream album. And we
Okay.
rehearsed for 5 days, Monday through noon to 6 every day, 6-hour rehearsals. At the end of the first day, Gord started strumming this thing in 12/8. And he sang a little bit of it. And somebody asked, I think Rick Haynes said, "What's that?" Gord said, "Don't worry about it. It's a song about a shipwreck that just happened in the Great Lakes. I just read the story in Newsweek magazine, but it won't be on the album. We're not going to record it. Don't worry about it."
Oh,
Second day, same thing. He starts strumming this thing at the end of the day. And God bless him, Pee Wee Charles, the steel guitarist, and Terry Clements, the lead guitarist, started playing something that they felt worked with the 12/8 strum. As soon as they started playing, Gord threw his hands up and said, "Nope, nope, nope. Don't worry about it. It's not going to be on the album. Worry about the songs that are going to be on the..." Okay. Third day, same thing. Fourth day, same things. Pee Wee and Terry had refined the part that they were playing.
oh,
I never played. Rick never played. We sat there because Gord said no. Anyway, we go into Eastern Sound and we're booked for 5 days, Monday through Friday, noon to 6 again. First day, we laid down 3 or 4 tracks. Great day. At the end
wow.
of the day, Gord starts strumming 12/8. Pee Wee and Terry start playing their part. The engineer and Gord throws his hands up as soon as the boys started playing, said, "No, don't," and he's angry. "Don't worry about it. We worry about the album. This song is not going to be on the album. It's not finished. Don't." Second day, same thing. Third day, same thing. And the engineer finally, pipes in and goes, "What is that song you keep playing?" Gord said, "Look, it's a ship went in the Great Lakes. I'm writing a song about it. I saw the story in Newsweek magazine. Don't worry about it. It won't be on the album." We get to Thursday, and we've now recorded all of the songs. They're all done. And
Oh my.
Gord said, "Thanks, guys. That's great. We'll talk." And as we're starting to leave, Kenny Friesen, the engineer, gets on the talkback and said, "Gord, what about that shipwreck song?" Gord said, "No, man, it's not finished. Don't worry." And Kenny said, "You got the guys here. You got the studio book. Why don't you put a little bit on tape?" Gord said, "Oh, man. All right, Terry, Pee Wee, play the part you're playing." And I'm not sure he said a word to Rick. And I said to him, "Gord, when do you want me to come in?" And he said, "I'll give you a nod." Gord sat across the studio from me. I was in the drum booth. So I'm sitting there patiently waiting. We get to like a minute and a half. We're into like the third verse, and we hadn't heard the song. So I'm thinking he forgot to cue me, because how long can this song be? Right?
Yes.
Anyway, we get to the third verse. Gord gives me a nod. I do a drum fill, and then we play the song out right to the end. Doug, as God is my witness, that's the record. We tried to
No.
play it better after that, and we came back. Gord said, "Let's come back tomorrow and do it for real. And we tried it a few times. There was something about the first take of that. There was a certain tension in it. There was a certain, not only was it a first take, Doug, it was the first time we'd ever played the song. So that is very unusual in the record business.
That's like that's
True
just
story.
that's massive to me. I'm kind of like right now blown away in my head. So that song is a one take song.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did that go on to be one of his biggest hits ever?
It was number 2 after Sundown, as far as it sold more. It was more popular than If You Could Read My Mind, Carefree Highway. And the other funny part of it was we were playing at the Universal Amphitheater after the album had been released. The first single, I think, was Summertime Dream off the Summertime Dream album. And Warner's was talking about what the next single should be. So Mo Austin, the president of Warner's, called Gord to come in for a meeting, and Gord asked me to go with him. So we went to Warner Brothers, during the day. We're sitting in Mo Austin's office, and Mo Austin said, "Well, Gord, it's time for a new single to come out." Now, we've been getting a lot of reaction to this Shipwreck song. And Gord and I are looking at each other like, aren't we talking about singles now? And Mo Austin said, "I think if we edited it down, because it's 6.5 minutes long, there's all the boxes you need to check for a hit record, like choruses, 3 minutes long, all of that kind of stuff. It didn't check any of the boxes." And I've been in the record business, and I'm like, "Mo, are we hearing you right? You're talking about this record to be single?" And Gord and I looked at each other, and Gord said, "Well, look, if you're going to edit it, I want to do the edits." And Mo said, "Yeah, that's fine, but we need to get it down to like 3.5 or 4 minutes." Anyway, Gord said, "Yeah, go ahead, put it out," because they had gotten reaction from FM stations, a lot of reaction that people liked this record. And so it ended up being number 1 in Cashbox, number 2 in Billboard magazine. It was, again, an international hit record.
See, again, this is almost the title of this episode's going to be "Nothing is What It Seems." It's like every story you said is startling to me. It's like the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. I have to be honest with you on this song. Is I felt that you must have worked hours and hours in the studio to make that song come together. Like you said, you did it in one take, and you couldn't do better it. Wow. It almost comes back to how you were saying about
hard
going on.
Six.
Yeah. When you
What's that?
What's that?
Go ahead.
It's what when you said about how do you when you went to the training or the courses with Phil Ramone, and you were taking what you were away for how you could listen to a producer would listen to drums. It's almost as if that first take kind of took all that emotion and all of that together, and you couldn't duplicate it again.
Yes. And I truly believe that because none of us knew the song, so there was an anxiety, a tension in the playing. I still hear there's a couple of drum fills that I remember thinking, is he going to start singing now or not? Or, the thought process of you don't want to fill over top of him singing. And I still hear a couple of those fills where they're a little bit shorter than maybe I would have done if I knew what I was doing. But there was a tension with all of the, everything we were playing, because we didn't know the song. So we were playing what we felt, listening to Gord play and sing, and there was a tension that wasn't there in any of the subsequent takes we tried.
Barry, it's. I know was not intentional or anything, but it's almost the methodology by how you work with, like, not knowing what the list was, kind of trained you on how to work with this unknowingly, right?
Mhm.
It's crazy to me. I just think it's like I could go on
It
all day
was,
listening to this.
well, when you think about like the lead guitarist in the band, he would play six-string acoustic or maybe electric, and not knowing what the next song was, you got to be pretty quick on your feet.
Oh,
And I learned from my baseball experience that, you see, I played two sticks on some songs, a stick and a brush on a song, two brushes on a song, hands on the snare drum with the snares off on a song. I learned that if I didn't know what the next song was, I could look to see if Gord was playing 12 string or 6 string. But my sports background from baseball,
oh
look
yeah.
fastball and adjust to the breaking pitch. So
Ah,
I would set up for the one that took me the longest to set up for, so that I could adjust quicker if it was a different song. So, and that kind of sports mentality came in handy for me working with Gord.
I think I think to me, he probably couldn't explain it, but he recognized it in your ability to do that all the time. Cool. That is
I
crazy to me.
guess there was.
So going back to your upbringing, shall we say? I mentioned before, and this has come up numerous times in talking with different personalities. Is I had mentioned about in athletes, like hockey in particular. If a father was in professional hockey and his son has talents to make it, and another person who has, I'll try and say, kind of equivalent talents or skill, but does not have a background with parents in professional sport, I'm hearing it's kind of recognized that the one that's going to be picked is the one that has the experience or background with parents being in professional sport. I've heard this again also in the music world, and this probably had some influence on you as well, in the sense of, I'll say, encouragement, but maybe even osmosis of not even knowing it's there. Because it doesn't sound like you were ever kind of asked, like, okay, this is great that you want to be a drummer, Barry, but like, what are you going to do for a job? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely no. And Doug, I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. Still, but anyway, what you say applies to sports. It applies to music. It applies to many professions. If you're around the profession that you want to be part of, like for me, with my father being backstage with major artists and speaking to major artists and being involved in the record business to see how records got put together, all of that stuff, all of a sudden there are fewer mysteries in the business. All of a sudden you're not completely out of your comfort zone. Part of it is you're used to, part of it is your comfort zone, and you can kind of go on from there and fill in the blanks after that. So I think there's a lot to be said for what, the point you're making.
I'll say you almost fell into this in a way, but you never had, like, and you've kind of come in a couple times saying things like, well, I didn't really know what I was doing. um did you ever have, like, that this you're just not cut out for this? Was this not, did you ever have that kind of, like, so we say, non-support from, like, friends or people that you know? You're smiling because, but it's one of those things that I think is so important.
Well, did I ever feel like I didn't belong? Pretty much every day of my life that I was in the studio, you look across and there's Guido Basso and Mo Kaufman and Russ Little and Don Thompson and Eric Robertson and Doug Riley. What am I doing here? Like there was that constant feeling, and there were times in the beginning. I'll never forget doing a Lipton tea jingle at Manta Sound in Toronto with all the big boys, and Eric Robertson had hummed to me the drum part. Now, I only knew that snare was on 2 and 4, but the chart had been written where the backbeat was on 3. So instead of it being 1 and 2 and 3, and it was written as 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So I knew the part, but I was reading the chart, and I was halfway through the chart, and all of a sudden I'm playing by myself. And I could see the look on Guido and Mo. I could see them looking like, what the hell are you doing? And so, but Eric came into the booth. He knew exactly what the problem was. He came in and explained it to me. But there were a lot of moments. And as nice as everybody was, Jack Zaza, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Jack Zaza's help, for the help of all of those great guys. There were a couple of guys. I can think of a couple whose names I won't mention, but they were nervous about somebody young and new breaking in because you might have some friends who were also younger than the guys you were playing with. They were a little bit worried, that's where the Wrecking Crew got their name from, was they were wrecking it for the older veterans, right? So,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, that's what I've heard is that, the new guys were coming in and the older guys were getting pushed out by these new guys. That's where the name The Wrecking Crew came from.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
There was a little bit, I could tell, there was a little bit of resistance on accepting me because I was younger than these guys. And maybe I had some friends who played other instruments who might come in and push them out of work. But by and large, everybody was so great and so accepting. And Jack Zaza himself got me through a couple of situations that I got hired by a wonderful orchestrator, arranger from Czechoslovakia named Milan Kimlicka. We had done a couple of Ian Thomas albums together.
Oh, wow.
And Milan liked the way I played. We went to London, England, and Milan wrote charts for the London Symphony on Ian's Long, Long Way album. I mean, Milan was just unbelievably talented, but he got a radio show, Ethnic Music, and Milan hired me to play on this. I was no more qualified to play ethnic music. I was one step above Wooly Bully. I mean, so anyway, we had a Greek. It was Greek week, and the first tune, there was a chart I was looking at. It was in 9/8 time, which is one of those that which is pretty far away from Louis Louis, Wooly Bully. I had no idea. And it was at a tempo like this. And it was like, oh my God, like I can't even fake my way through this. Anyway, Jack Zaza, who was playing bouzouki on this, and he was making mistakes left, right, and center. He was having trouble playing the part. Jack's a wonderful musician, played every instrument under the sun. But Jack was laughing so hard because he could hear me trying to fit in. He took his time to come into the drum booth and gave me a part that I could play. At least I could fake it to go through that. When Jack should have been taking his time learning his own part. But here's a man who took his time to come around to help me. And that got me through. That got me through. But it was that kind of help from some of the veterans in the business that kept me in the business. So
yeah. That's a neat. I like that story. That's a fun story. It makes you it gets you a real sense, especially like you were saying with the sense, because this is a real thing in everyone, is people being concerned about their jobs, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
of course, like I used to find it because they wouldn't tell you things, right? Because like,
Right.
well, if I tell you this, then you'll know and you'll take my job. And it's
Exactly.
interesting that that's in kind of all walks of life that are kind of like that. But then there's others that don't see things that way, right? Which makes it kind of a joyful and a neat way of working. I was gonna ask you, as far as other, like we've gone through a lot of really memorable stories for me. Like it's really neat to hear the Edmund Fitzgerald story. I had no idea. It's just one of those things that it just sounded like a very well put together song that you cut in one cut. I have to
Thank
tell you, I was at with my son. I went to it was a Rush concert, and
you.
Gordon was at the far end of the row from us. He had walked down, and I didn't know at the time, but it was Ray Daniels, their manager, was sitting in front of us. And it was after I'd been there that I kind of, I know that's who that is. And I think they were talking. But um, what this kind of reminded me of was the long stays, the famous long stays you used to have at Massey Hall.
Yes.
And like I think they were in the March time frame. How did they come about, Barry? Because they're kind of famous. If I'm not like they were a long stay, and Gordon Lightfoot and your the band that became kind of a famous thing that happened every year for a while.
Oh, it was. It was every March for a long time. Later on, it got to be it was March and then the fall, a year and a half later in November and then a year and a half. But back in the day, I remember doing 11 Massey Hall shows in 10 days. We did an afternoon show on Mother's Day one
Wow.
year. So 11. I mean, people give their eye teeth to play once at Massey Hall. Um, I've recently been doing the Andy Kim. I've been
Oh,
uh, a guest with Andy Kim's regular band. Andy once a year does a Christmas charity show, and recently he has asked me to be a percussionist in the band, and Alex Lifeson is the guest lead guitarist. So Alex and I are the two guests with Andy Kim's regular
no
band there.
way.
And so in the last few have been at Massey Hall. And somebody asked me, they said, "Man, you played here a lot. How many times?" So I went back and did the math. Again, people who would give their eye teeth to play once. The last Andy Kim show was my 164th Massey Hall show. So,
Oh my God.
yeah, there
That's
you go. That's
that's
how
like
many, yeah.
that's like playing a whole half year almost.
It is. Yes, no question. So, and every one of them was so, honestly, was so special. It was the hometown gig, the hometown crowd. It was Gordon being his uptight self, playing hometown, all of that stuff. There was so much enjoyment, so much joy, so much tension. It was the combination of all the great things that makes for great performances.
Barry, before we go, what's it like now with your friend not being here anymore?
It's yeah, we spent 48 years
Yeah.
recording, touring, traveling, living. You know, when you're on the road, you live with somebody. You really do. You see them. We were in a habit of playing 10 shows in 10 different cities in 11 days. We would play 5 shows in 5 cities, have a travel day, 5 shows in 5 cities, and fly home. When you're in a small airplane together, when you're in small dressing rooms together, uh, yeah, it was somebody that I had worked with, argued with, created with, traveled with. It becomes a family. It really does. And we spoke many times about two worlds.
Oh.
There was the world of being home with your family, with doing whatever you did at home. And then there was being on tour world, where it became a way of life, where you had a routine for the day. And, you know, the old joke about somebody coming on stage and not knowing what city they were in. It actually happens. It does. Things, you know, you're in 10 different cities in 11 days. And, you know, it can get to be confusing. It can. But anyway, life is completely different with Gordon gone. I mean, 48 years of having a route. You know, I miss him as a creative person that he was. I miss him as the great performer that he was. I miss him as a friend. Just my association with Gordon opened so many doors to me. Being a sports fan, I got to meet so many people that were my sports heroes.
Yes.
I've got to do sports radio shows. I've co-hosted a number of radio shows because of my association with Gordon Lightfoot. I was actually the color commentator for a professional baseball game in Akron, Ohio one time. All because the play-by-play guy was a Gordon Lightfoot fan, and then we talked. He found out I knew about baseball, asked me to be the color guy. But so many things I'm thankful to Gordon. Gordon opened so many doors for me. I miss him in so many ways, and life is different.
No, that's beautiful, Barry. Because I sometimes wonder, like, we're all people, right? In that performance, and you even you recognize that, like, I think it was Pert that said something in Limelight about I can't pretend a person is when I'm meeting them, I can't pretend a person is a long-awaited friend, and living in the limelight. And so many see that you on stage, and they don't kind of recognize what's behind that. It's just like, that's where we want to be, as an example. And I'm often like, you're still human. You're still a person. There's still emotion, and it's like hearing it from that other perspective. It's like kind of a neat thing. Another thing I was going to ask is were there any particular, I'll say, a moment that you remember on stage that was particularly touching, or that affected you in a big way?
I can think of two offhand. That was toward the last years of playing with Gordon. Hearing him sing and play If You Could Read My Mind on a nightly basis, being on stage, me being 10 feet from Gordon Lightfoot with him singing that song, I started giving him a standing ovation because it's one of the greatest songs ever written. And you could see in the crowd how much it meant to people. And here I was being on stage with the man that created that performed that, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. I gave him a standing ovation. Now,
That's cool.
The other one I can remember was we were playing the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, and I think we did 3 or 4 nights at the Greek, and it held, 4,000 or 5,000 people. This was in the heyday, and it was the last show of a tour that we had. And we came off stage, and again, we didn't know what songs Gord was going to play, but we came off, and he would say on occasion what the encore would be. So as we were walking off stage, he said, Pussy Willow's Cattails, which is a song I didn't play on. So we came off. I'm standing beside the road manager, and the smartass in me had to take advantage of this. So Barry Harvey, our great road manager, tour manager, it was the end of the tour, and managing Gordon Lightfoot and managing the band and going through everything, he could see the light at the end of the tunnel on the tour. It was like, okay, we got through one, we're done. All we have is one more song, and we're done. I've done my job. So the other guys went on stage and I stood beside Barry and he said, well, better get out there. And I said, nope. He didn't know what song Gord was going to play. And he said, why not? I said, I want a raise. And Barry said, you what? You want what? I said, you want more money? And I said, yeah. And he said, we got to talk about this at the office when we get back to Toronto. I said, no, now. He said, what do you want? I said, what do you have on you? He went, come on, man. And so TikTok. Anyway, in the midst of this, I'm thinking, this is taking the clock in my head. This is taking a very long time for Gord to be playing. So anyway, I turned and looked. Gord was looking at me standing on stage at the Greek Theatre, strumming his guitar. And I knew he had changed his mind. And it was a song that I played in. He was waiting for me to come out to play the drums. There were 4,000 or 5,000 people waiting for me, being the smartest, and get this. Anyway, I walked out. I got a standing ovation because it was like, all right, finally, the drummer's here. We played Old Dan's records because Gord changed his mind at one. So anyway, being a smart ass, I got it right. So those two.
I really like the standing ovation. That's a very cool sentiment for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I really don't want to leave this today, Barry, and I hope maybe we can do this again. But I also don't want to get interrupted by technical difficulties again. But do you have anything that you'd like to kind of wrap up with today? Like anything that kind of comes to mind, be it a person who is a Canadian music fan or a Gordon Lightfoot fan, or even just a young musician that's kind of looking at that's where they're trying to go, or just something that from yourself that you'd like to kind of wrap up with today?
Well, just how lucky and privileged I've been, I think, every day of my life. I kind of liken it to being in a fantasy camp. My entire life has been where people pay to be part of, you can go play with the New York Yankees for 5 days if you pay 5. I feel like I'm part of a fantasy camp my whole life. Only people have paid me. I haven't paid to be part of it. I feel, honestly, it might sound like false humility, but I'm very lucky, very privileged. Every day of my life, I'm grateful to where I'm at. And anybody who's a Gordon Lightfoot fan of his songs, of the person, please come see the Lightfoot Band.
Yes.
If you like the songs, we played them the way Gordon wanted them played. And he wasn't shy about letting us know the way he wanted them played. But we played them the way we played them with Gord. And afterward, as I mentioned before, meet and greets. If you have any questions about what it's like to tour, to record, to be a real musician on stage, that kind of a thing, or if you're a Lightfoot fan and you want to find out what was Gord really like, those kind of questions. All the guys who lived it, Rick Haynes was with him for 55 years. So, if this is your chance to ask questions and it doesn't cost you any money, your ticket to come see us is your backstage pass. So I would just say I encourage people to come out and see the band and come talk to us after the show.
So Barry, with that said, where can people find out about where you're playing? Do you have a website or?
Yes, the lightfootband.com. It gives you a list of all the dates we have coming up, and the lightfootband.com.
And if a person wants to find out more about you in particular, they can go there as well to the lightfootband.com.
If you go to band members, we all have short bios there.
Okay.
And there's a link to my longer bio. If you're really interested, you can click the link and find out a little bit more about my background, if you're interested.
Very, very, very cool. Well, we'll put that on the note for when the podcast comes out as well. So I can't thank you enough, Barry, for coming on today. I love the stories that you put together, and I think it's given a really interesting picture on another, shall we say, life in the Canadian music world. And it's been for me, it's been a very cool experience listening to that, and I hope for listeners is like that as well. So thank you very much. With
Entirely my
thanks, Barry. With that, I was going to say, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have, and meeting Barry Keane, and the drummer, the man who's done so much, I'll say, with Gordon Lightfoot and other personalities that you know about in the music business in Canada. And thank you again, Barry, for all the stories. And may you tune in again to Better Than Not, and hopefully you'll subscribe to hear more. Thanks again. Bye for now.
Thank you, Doug.
Are we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not.